A waitress secretly feeds 3 homeless girls every day. One morning, a luxury car parks in front of her restaurant. Before we jump in, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know. The morning sun sliced through the grimy windows of the Sunshine Diner, casting long golden rectangles across the worn linoleum floor. Emma Chase tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear as she balanced 3 plates along her forearm. A skill perfected over years of waitressing at this small Brooklyn establishment, known for its crispy waffles and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. "Order up for table 7, she called cheerfully, despite the exhaustion tugging at her bones. The early shift always left her drained, but Emma couldn't afford to slow down. Not with rent due next week, and certainly not when there were 3 special visitors she expected at precisely 2:15 p.m. Frank, the diner's perpetually frowning manager, watched from behind the counter as Emma discreetly wrapped leftover pancakes and a few fresh sandwiches in napkins. His bushy eyebrows furrowed deeper than usual. "Emma," he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. "That's the 3rd time this week. Food costs money, you know. Money we don't have to spare." Emma met his gaze steadily. "It's just leftovers, Frank. Would go in the trash anyway." "Not all of it," he countered, nodding toward the freshly made sandwich she was wrapping. "Look, I get it. You've got a big heart. But this is a business, not a charity." Emma's retort was interrupted by the soft knock at the back door, 3 gentle taps followed by 2 quicker ones. A secret code she'd established weeks ago. Frank's disapproving glare followed her as she slipped toward the kitchen's rear exit. When Emma pushed open the heavy metal door, 3 pairs of eyes looked up at her, wary, hopeful, hungry. The oldest girl, Lily, stood protectively in front of her younger sisters. At 12, her childhood had already been replaced by responsibility far beyond her years. Behind her, 9-year-old Sophie clutched the hand of little Hazel, who at 6 still maintained the innocent wonder that her older sisters had long since lost. "You came," Emma said, her smile warm as she held out the food parcels. "I saved the blueberry pancakes for you today, Hazel. I remember you said they were your favorite." The smallest girl's face lit up, though she remained partially hidden behind Sophie. Lily was the only one who stepped forward, accepting the offerings with dignity rather than desperation, though Emma knew how desperately they needed it. "Thank you," Lily said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of someone far older. We brought you something too." From her tattered jacket pocket she produced 3 folded papers. Emma accepted them, carefully unfolding each to reveal childish drawings. Hazel's chaotic scribbles of what might be sunshine, Sophie's careful attempt at drawing the diner, and Lily's surprisingly detailed sketch of Emma herself, smiling behind the counter. "These are beautiful," Emma whispered, genuine, emotion tightening her throat. "I'll hang them up right away." As the girls prepared to leave with their precious food parcels, Emma noticed Lily's shoes, worn through at the soles, held together with what looked like tape. "Wait," she called, making the girls freeze momentarily. "It might rain later. Take this." She handed over her own umbrella, a small kindness that seemed to embarrass rather than comfort Lily. "We don't need charity," the girl said stiffly, though her eyes betrayed her gratitude. "It's not charity between friends," Emma replied gently. "It's just looking out for each other." As she watched the 3 sisters disappear down the alley, Emma felt the familiar ache in her chest. Who were these children? Where did they live? Why weren't they in school? She had gathered small pieces of their story over the weeks, enough to know they were in trouble but not enough to help in any meaningful way. Behind her, Frank cleared his throat. Emma turned to find him standing in the doorway, arms crossed. "This has to stop, Emma," he said firmly. "I mean it this time. Either you stop giving away free food or I'll have to let you go. I can't afford both your kindness and your salary." Emma pressed the children's drawings to her chest, her jaw set with determination as she brushed past him back into the kitchen. "Then I guess you'll have to let me go," she murmured, "because those girls need this food more than I need this job." But, even as she said it, panic fluttered in her stomach. Without this job, how would she pay her rent? And more importantly, who would feed those three hungry girls with the sad, ancient eyes? Emma's heart raced as she spotted Frank approaching, with determination in his eyes. The ultimatum still echoed in her mind. Stop feeding the girls or lose her job. Emma, this is your final warning, Frank said, voice unusually firm. I can't run a business this way. Before she could respond, the back door creaked open. 3 small figures huddled there, soaked from the sudden downpour. Lily's eyes were wide with fear, her sisters shivering behind her. Get in quickly, Emma whispered, ushering them toward the storage pantry as Frank turned to serve a customer. Stay quiet. Inside the cramped space among flour sacks and canned goods, Emma helped the girls out of their wet clothes and wrapped them in clean aprons. I'm sorry, Lily whispered, her voice catching. We wouldn't have come but the shelter where we've been staying. It flooded, Sophie continued, her small voice hollow. Everything got wet. Emma knelt to their level. Where's your mother? Maybe I can help contact her. The sisters exchanged glances before Lily spoke. She died last week. The funeral was yesterday. Her words were matter-of-fact, but her eyes betrayed depths of grief no child should know. Oh, God, Emma breathed, understanding crashing over her. You've been alone since then? Hazel nodded, clutching a worn teddy bear. Lily takes care of us. She always has, even when Mommy was sick. Emma fought back tears as Lily explained in halting sentences. Their mother's long illness, how they'd been living in a makeshift shelter beneath a highway overpass after being evicted, how Lily had been skipping school to ensure her sisters were fed. I promised Mom I'd keep us together, Lily said fiercely. They'll separate us in foster care, I've heard the stories. A sharp knock on the pantry door made them all jump. Emma? Are you in there? Frank called. Emma squeezed Lily's hand reassuringly before slipping out, pulling the door nearly closed. Behind her. What are you doing? Frank demanded. Inventory, Emma lied. Listen, Frank, I need to talk to you about something important. Before she could continue, the front door chimed. Both turned to see a tall figure entering, water dripping from an expensive coat. The entire diner fell silent as everyone recognized the newcomer. Jackson Reynolds had arrived. A hush fell over the Sunshine Diner as the tall man shook raindrops from his expensive coat. Even in his disheveled state, Jackson Reynolds commanded attention. His presence was so unexpected in this modest Brooklyn establishment that several customers stopped mid-bite. Frank hurried forward. Mr. Reynolds, what an honor to have you in our humble diner. Jackson barely acknowledged him, scanning the restaurant with bloodshot eyes shadowed by dark circles. His perfectly tailored suit couldn't hide the exhaustion that seemed to weigh on his broad shoulders. Just coffee. Black, he said, his voice hoarse as he slid into a corner booth. Emma watched curiously, while wiping down the counter. Everyone in New York knew Jackson Reynolds, the real estate mogul whose face graced business magazines and whose name adorned gleaming skyscrapers across Manhattan. What was he doing in their small diner, looking like he hadn't slept in days? I'll take this one, Emma told Frank, grabbing a coffee pot. As she approached Jackson's table, she noticed his attention fixed on something behind the counter. The drawings, the 3 colorful papers she'd pinned up just hours earlier. Your coffee, sir, Emma said, filling his cup. Jackson didn't look at her. Those drawings, he said, gesturing with a slight tremor in his hand. Where did you get them? They're from some children who visit occasionally, Emma replied carefully. Jackson's gaze finally met hers, his eyes a startling shade of blue even in their weariness. 3 girls? Ages approximately 12, 9, and 6? Emma's protective instincts flared. Why are you asking? Before he could answer, a small voice called from the pantry. Emma, can we come out now? Jackson went rigid, his face draining of color. Emma turned to see the pantry door crack open, Sophie's curious face peeking through. Wait there, Emma called, but it was too late. The 3 sisters emerged, Lily leading with cautious steps. The moment stretched like pulled taffy as Jackson and the girls stared at each other. Recognition flickered across Lily's face, followed immediately by fear. She stepped in front of her sisters, a human shield. "You're identical to the photos she sent," Jackson whispered, rising slowly from his seat. His voice cracked with emotion. "I would know you anywhere." Emma moved between them instinctively. "I don't know who you are to these girls, but you're scaring them." "I'm their father," Jackson said, never taking his eyes off the children. "And I've been searching for them for years." Lily's voice cut through the silence, sharp as broken glass. "If you're our father, where have you been all this time? Where were you when Mom died?" The pain that crossed Jackson's face was so raw that even Emma felt it. Outside, thunder cracked as the storm intensified, matching the emotional tempest brewing inside the small diner. The tension in the diner was palpable as Jackson Reynolds stood frozen, his gaze locked on the three girls. Emma positioned herself protectively between them, unsure of what to do next. The few remaining customers watched the scene unfold with undisguised curiosity. "Lily, take your sisters back to the pantry," Emma said quietly, not taking her eyes off Jackson. "No," Lily replied, her voice barely audible. "If he has something to say to us, I want to hear it." Jackson took a hesitant step forward, then stopped when Lily flinched. "I've been looking for you," he said, his voice trembling. "For 6 years I've had private investigators searching everywhere." "Liar," Lily spat, though uncertainty flickered across her young face. "Mom said our father didn't want us." "Is that what Rebecca told you?" Jackson's face contorted with pain. "She disappeared with you when you were just babies. I came home one day to find everything gone. You, her, even your cribs." Frank cleared his throat loudly. "Perhaps this family reunion could happen somewhere more private?" Emma nodded. "My shift ends in 20 minutes. We can talk at my apartment." Jackson looked ready to protest the delay but seemed to think better of it when he saw the fear in the girl's eyes. "Of course," he said, reaching into his pocket for a business card. "My number. Please call when you're ready." As Jackson reluctantly departed, Emma guided the sisters back to the pantry. Hazel was crying silently while Sophie looked confused. Lily's face had hardened into a mask. "Do you recognize him?" Emma asked gently. Lily shook her head. "Mom never showed us pictures. She just said he was rich and powerful and didn't want the responsibility of children." "But we saw his picture in a magazine once," Sophie added quietly. "Mom got really upset and threw it away." Emma's mind raced. Could this be a case of mistaken identity? But Jackson had seemed so certain, and the girls' unusual situation suddenly made more sense if they were the missing children of a wealthy businessman. "We're not going with him," Lily stated firmly. "We don't know him." "No one's forcing you to go anywhere," Emma assured her, though she wondered what legal rights Jackson might have as their father. "Let's just hear what he has to say." When Emma's shift ended, she called the number on Jackson's card. He answered immediately as if he'd been staring at his phone, waiting. 20 minutes later, they all sat awkwardly in Emma's tiny living room. Jackson had removed his expensive coat but still looked painfully out of place among the second-hand furniture. "I can prove I'm your father," he said, opening a leather portfolio. "I have birth certificates, photos from the day you were born." His hands trembled as he laid out the documents. "I never stopped looking for you. Never." Sophie leaned forward cautiously to examine a photograph of 2 newborn babies. "That's us?" "You and Lily," Jackson confirmed. "Identical twins. You arrived first, then Lily 3 minutes later. Hazel wasn't born yet. Rebecca was pregnant when she left." Lily's defensive posture wavered as she stared at the evidence of a history she couldn't remember. The small apartment grew quiet as Jackson pulled out more photographs, a wedding picture with a beautiful blonde woman, another showing her pregnant, and finally a legal document with missing persons report stamped across the top. "Rebecca and I met at Columbia," Jackson began, his voice strained. "It was a whirlwind romance. We married after graduation, just before my career took off. When she got pregnant with twins, we were ecstatic." Emma watched the girls' faces as they absorbed his words. Hazel had edged closer to the photos, fascination overcoming her fear. "What happened?" Emma asked gently. Jackson's shoulders sagged. We had a fight. A stupid argument about my work hours. I was building my company, working 18-hour days. Rebecca wanted me home more. He rubbed his forehead. I said things I regretted immediately. The next morning, I brought flowers to apologize, but the house was empty. She'd taken the twins and disappeared. Lily's eyes narrowed. Mom said you chose your business over your family. I chose both, Jackson countered, his voice breaking. Or I tried to. I never got the chance to prove that to her. If you were looking for us, how come you never found us? Sophie asked, her voice small but direct. Rebecca changed her name. Your names too, apparently. She withdrew cash, left no paper trail. Jackson's hand trembled as he placed a business card on the table. This is the private investigator I hired. He's been working your case for 6 years. Then how did you find us now? Lily challenged. Jackson's expression darkened with grief. 2 weeks ago, my investigator found an obituary for a Rebecca Bennett. The photo matched. I flew back from Tokyo immediately for the funeral, hoping to find you there, but you never showed up. Emma glanced at Lily, understanding dawning. The funeral was private, just the 3 of them. Mom didn't want a big service, Lily whispered, tears finally breaking through her tough exterior. She said people would just pretend to care. I would have been there, Jackson said, leaning forward. I would have been there for all of it. Her illness, the hospital bills, everything, if only I'd known. The hospital bills, Sophie repeated, understanding blooming in her young eyes. That's why we lost our apartment. Jackson looked stricken. You were evicted? Where have you been living? The sisters exchanged glances, none willing to admit the truth. Emma answered for them. They've been staying in various shelters, recently under a highway overpass. The color drained from Jackson's face, his hands clenched until the knuckles turned white. My daughters, homeless, he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. While I lived in a penthouse with empty bedrooms, for the first time Lily's expression softened slightly. Mom did her best, she said defensively. She was really sick for a long time. I believe you, Jackson said gently. And I'm not here to replace her or erase her memory. I just want a chance to be your father, the father I never got to be. The silence that followed was heavy with 6 years of separation and misunderstanding. The next day, Emma sat cross-legged on her apartment floor, watching Jackson awkwardly perch on her second-hand sofa. The girls clustered together on the opposite, and maintaining a careful distance. The atmosphere was fragile, like thin ice over deep water. I thought we could start by just talking, Emma suggested, trying to ease the tension. No pressure, no big decisions today. Jackson nodded gratefully. He'd traded yesterday's business suit for jeans and a sweater, clearly an attempt to appear less intimidating. I brought something, he said, reaching for his messenger bag. Photos of your mother that you might not have seen. This captured their attention. Sophie slid slightly closer as Jackson pulled out a leather album. This was your mom at graduation, he said, pointing to a laughing young woman in a cap and gown, her blonde hair catching sunlight. She was valedictorian. Mom was really smart, Hazel piped up, the first words she'd spoken all morning. Emboldened, she moved closer, peering at the album with undisguised curiosity. The smartest person I've ever known, Jackson agreed, his voice warm with memory. She could solve the Sunday crossword in pen. She still did that, Sophie whispered. Even in the hospital. Jackson's smile was painful to witness. She loved puzzles of all kinds. Is that something you like too? The conversation slowly unfolded, stilted at first, then gradually warming as Jackson shared gentle stories about their mother's quirks and talents. Lily remained vigilant, but even she leaned forward when Jackson described their mother's love of painting. That's where you get your artistic abilities, he told Lily, nodding toward the drawings Emma had hung on her refrigerator. Rebecca could capture emotion in just a few brushstrokes. Did you really look for us? Hazel asked suddenly, now sitting close enough to touch Jackson's sleeve. The whole time? Every single day, Jackson answered, his voice thick. I have a private investigator who's been working exclusively on finding you for 6 years. Are you really our dad? Sophie asked, the question everyone had been circling. Jackson's eyes filled with tears. Every day since you were born, he whispered. Even when I couldn't find you, I was still your father. Looking at their faces, identical to the childhood photos of Rebecca that Jackson had shown them, Emma knew there could be no question of paternity. The resemblance was too strong to deny. I have a house, Jackson said carefully, in Manhattan, with plenty of room for each of you to have your own bedroom. Lily stiffened immediately. We're not going anywhere with a stranger. Lily. Emma began. No! The 12-year-old stood up. We don't know him. We only have each other, and we're staying with Emma. Jackson looked stricken, but nodded slowly. I understand your caution. Maybe we could start with visits? Get to know each other first? The compromise hung in the air, a tenuous bridge between worlds. Emma stood by the window of her apartment, watching as Jackson's sleek Bentley pulled up to the curb below. It had been 3 days since their first meeting, and today the girls had agreed to visit his Manhattan home. Do we have to go? Lily asked, adjusting the collar of her newly purchased coat. Jackson had sent over clothes for all 3 sisters. Nothing flashy or expensive looking, Emma noted with approval. Just clean, well-made basics. No one's forcing you, Emma reminded her gently. But sometimes the things that scare us most are the things we need to face. Sophie was already by the door, excitement barely contained in her 9-year-old frame. Hazel clutched her teddy bear, torn between following Sophie's enthusiasm and Lily's caution. What if he wants to keep us? Lily whispered, her voice betraying her deepest fear. What if we never see you again? Emma knelt before the girl, meeting her eyes. Listen to me. Nothing happens without your say-so. You're visiting, not moving in. I'll be right there with you the whole time. Promise? Hazel asked, her small hand slipping. Into Emma's, I promise. Downstairs, Jackson waited beside the car, nervousness evident in his stance. For a man who reportedly negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, he looked terrified at the prospect of spending an afternoon with 3 children. The drive to Manhattan was quiet, the city transforming around them as they crossed the bridge. Gleaming skyscrapers replaced Brooklyn's brick facades, crowds thickened, and suddenly they were pulling into a private underground parking beneath one of the tallest buildings overlooking Central Park. You live here? Sophie breathed, pressing her face against the window. The top 2 floors, Jackson replied, his voice carefully neutral, as if conscious that his wealth might further alienate them. Emma felt Lily's hand tighten around hers as the elevator whisked them upward. When the doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, all 3 girls froze, overwhelmed by the expanse of marble and glass before them. I know it's a lot, Jackson said quickly, but I thought you might like to see your rooms. If you decide to stay sometimes, you'd each have your own space. Hazel's eyes widened. We get different rooms? The question broke Emma's heart. How crowded must their life have been for separate bedrooms to seem like an unimaginable luxury? Jackson led them through the apartment, each room more impressive than the last. Sophie gasped at the library with floor-to-ceiling shelves. Mom would have loved this, she whispered to no one in particular. Then came the bedrooms. Jackson had prepared 3, each decorated differently but with thoughtful details. Hazel's had a canopy bed with fairy lights. Sophie's featured a telescope, pointed toward the park. And Lily's. My drawings, Lily said, her voice faltering as she stepped into the room. The walls were adorned with framed artwork, exact replicas of the sketches she'd given Emma, professionally enlarged and preserved. I had them scanned from Emma's photos, Jackson explained. I thought you might want to see your art treated with the respect it deserves. As Lily stood transfixed by her artwork, Emma noticed a door left slightly ajar at the end of the hallway. Curiosity drew her forward while Jackson continued showing the girls their rooms. Inside was clearly Jackson's home office, a sleek desk overlooking the Manhattan skyline, walls lined with awards and business achievements. But what caught Emma's eye was a table covered with folders, each labeled meticulously by date. She picked up the nearest one, her breath catching as she read, Bennett Sisters Investigation Report. Inside were photographs, grainy surveillance images of Rebecca in various locations over the years, medical records, school registration attempts. 6 years of searching compressed into paper trails. The most recent folder contained a newspaper obituary clipping, the lead that had finally brought Jackson to Brooklyn. "I see you found my war room." Emma startled at Jackson's voice behind her. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." "It's all right," he said, stepping into the office. "I wanted you to see this anyway. I need you to understand I never abandoned them." Before Emma could respond, Lily appeared in the doorway, her eyes immediately drawn to the investigation files. "What is all this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Jackson hesitated before answering. "Every lead, every possible sighting of you and your mother for the past 6 years. My investigator would send weekly reports, even when there was nothing. To report." Lily approached the table cautiously, lifting a photograph of a playground. In the background, barely visible, were 3 small figures. "That was at our old school," she whispered, "before Mom got sick." She looked up at Jackson, confusion evident in her eyes. "You were that close to finding us?" "Dozens of times," Jackson admitted. "Your mother was very careful. By the time my investigator would reach a location, you'd be gone." Emma watched as Lily's carefully constructed wall of resentment began to crack. The evidence of Jackson's persistence was impossible to deny. "Lily! Lily!" Sophie's excited voice echoed from the hallway. "You have to see the view from my room. You can see the whole park." Jackson glanced at Lily, then Emma. "Would you like to join your sisters? The sunset over Central Park is quite remarkable." Lily gave a small nod, carefully returning the photograph to its folder before following Jackson. Out. Emma lingered, overwhelmed by the physical manifestation of a father's 6-year quest. It was impossible to fake this level of dedication. Later, as they gathered in the enormous kitchen, Jackson awkwardly attempted to make dinner, burning toast, and overcooking pasta in a way that made even Hazel giggle. Emma stepped in, guiding him through the basics while the girls watched from the counter stools. "He's really bad at this," Sophie whispered loudly to Lily. "Worse than when you tried to make birthday pancakes," Hazel agreed. For the first time, since meeting Jackson, Lily's smile reached her eyes. "Maybe he needs cooking lessons as much as we need, whatever this is." The morning sun filtered through the grimy windows of Sunshine Diner as Emma wiped down the counter, her movements automatic after years of the same routine. Yet everything had changed. The 3 little faces that had become her daily purpose were absent, now waking up in Manhattan penthouses with Central Park views. "You miss them," Frank observed, surprising Emma with his perception. The gruff manager leaned against the register, arms crossed. "Those girls got under your skin." "They're still adjusting," Emma replied, avoiding his gaze. "Jackson texts me, updates every few hours." Frank raised an eyebrow. "First name basis with a billionaire, huh? Never thought I'd see the day." Emma felt her cheeks warm. In the week since the girls had begun staying with Jackson, her own life had taken on a strange duality. Days at the diner, evenings spent on video calls with 3 excited children showing off their new discoveries. The bell above the door jingled, and Emma turned to see Jackson himself walking in, looking distinctly out of place in his tailored suit. Several customers stared openly. "Emma," he greeted, sliding onto a stool. "Got a minute?" Frank nudged her. "Take your break. I'll cover your tables." Outside, they walked along the quiet Brooklyn street, an odd pair, the waitress and the tycoon. "The girls are settling in, but it's been challenging," Jackson admitted, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Hazel had a nightmare. I didn't know what to do. You sat with her until she fell back asleep," Emma guessed. Jackson looked surprised. "How did you know?" "Because that's what she needs. Simple human contact." Emma smiled softly. "You're learning." They stopped at a small park, watching children play on swings. "I keep making mistakes," Jackson said. Yesterday I hired a tutor to assess where they are academically. Lily refused to participate, said it felt like a test she hadn't studied for. She's protective of her sisters, Emma explained. She's been their mother figure for so long. Every decision you make feels like it undermines her authority. Jackson was quiet for a moment. Would you consider having dinner with us tonight? The girls miss you, and frankly, he added with a self-deprecating smile, I could use the help. The request hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to address. The call came at 2 a.m., jarring Emma from sleep. Jackson's voice was tight with panic. It's Sophie. She's burning up with fever. The doctor is on his way, but she keeps asking for you. Emma was in a taxi within minutes, clutching her coat over pajamas. The city blurred past as she stared at the phone where Jackson had sent a photo of Sophie's flushed face against silk pillows. When she arrived at the penthouse, chaos greeted her. A stern-looking doctor was directing two nurses while Jackson paced, disheveled and frantic. Lily and Hazel huddled together on a sofa, terrified. Emma! Hazel cried, running to her. Sophie's really sick. Where is she? Emma asked, hugging the child briefly before addressing the room. Master bedroom, the doctor replied. I've administered medication, but her fever remains concerning. Emma found Sophie curled in Jackson's enormous bed, small and fragile against the luxurious bedding. Her cheeks blazed with fever, hair plastered to her forehead. Hey, sweetie, Emma whispered, sitting beside her. Sophie's eyes fluttered open. Emma, she mumbled, don't feel good. I know, honey. Emma stroked her hair gently. But we're going. To make you better. Jackson appeared in the doorway, watching as Emma expertly checked Sophie's temperature and adjusted the cool cloth on her forehead. I've been useless, he admitted quietly. I panicked and called everyone. My personal physician, a pediatric specialist, 2 nurses. Emma glanced around at the medical entourage. Sophie doesn't need an army. She needs comfort and hydration. She turned to the professionals. Thank you for coming, but I think we can handle it from here. The doctor can check in tomorrow morning. After some discussion, the medical team departed, leaving instructions and medication. Jackson watched in amazement as Emma transformed his kitchen into a makeshift sick room station, preparing ice packs, brewing ginger tea, and mixing honey with lemon. How do you know all this? He asked as she carried a tray toward the bedroom. Practice, Emma replied simply. The girls caught colds last winter. We couldn't afford doctors, so I learned what worked. In the bedroom, Lily and Hazel had climbed onto the bed beside their sister. Jackson hesitated at the threshold, uncertain of his place. Come on, Emma encouraged. Your daughter needs you too. Hours passed. Sophie drifted in and out of sleep, while Emma gently coaxed fluids into her. Jackson sat awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence reading stories when Sophie was awake and simply being present when she wasn't. Near dawn, with Sophie's fever finally breaking, Lily unexpectedly spoke. Mom used to sing to us when we were sick, she said, watching her sister sleep. She wasn't very good, but it always made us feel better. Jackson's expression softened. What did she sing? Old Disney songs, mostly. She loved Beauty and the Beast. A fragile moment of connection bloomed in the quiet room. For the first time, Lily was offering a memory freely, a tentative bridge between their old life and whatever this new one might become. 3 weeks had passed since Sophie's fever, a turning point that had subtly shifted the dynamic between Jackson and his daughters. Emma noticed the changes each time she visited, how Hazel now ran to greet her father when he returned from work, how Sophie would curl up beside him during movie nights, and most significantly, how Lily had begun to soften around the edges. A crisp Saturday morning, Jackson invited Emma to join them for brunch at a small cafe near Central Park. As the girls chatted animatedly about their new school placements, Emma observed the transformation in their faces, the haunted look gradually replaced by the ordinary exuberance of childhood. Could we speak privately for a moment? Jackson asked as the girls became absorbed in an impromptu game of tic-tac-toe on a napkin. They walked to a quiet corner of the restaurant, Jackson uncharacteristically nervous, fidgeting with his coffee cup. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened," he began. "About how many children must be in the same situation my daughters were in. Homeless, hungry, invisible to people like me who have the means to help." Emma listened, curious where this was leading. "I want to create a foundation," Jackson continued, his voice gaining confidence, "for homeless children and families. Not just another charity that throws money at the problem, but something that addresses the real issues: housing stability, education continuity, medical care." "That's incredible," Emma said, genuinely impressed. "I want you to run it." The words hung between them, unexpected and transformative. "Me? But I'm just a waitress. I don't know the first thing about running a foundation." Jackson shook his head. "You know more than all my business associates combined about what these families actually need. You saw my daughters when no one else did. You fed them when you could barely feed yourself." The intensity in his eyes made Emma look away. "It's a generous offer, but it's not charity," Jackson said, echoing her own words from weeks ago. "It's recognizing value. Come with me. I want to show you something." After arranging for a nanny to watch the girls, Jackson drove Emma to an abandoned warehouse in a neglected Brooklyn neighborhood. The massive brick building stood silent, windows boarded up, yet somehow dignified in its disrepair. "This building has been empty for years," Jackson explained as they walked the perimeter. "My company acquired it in a portfolio purchase. I've been trying to decide what to do with it." Emma could see potential in the soaring ceilings and sturdy walls. "What are you thinking?" "A community center, emergency housing upstairs, health clinic, job training, whatever is needed." His eyes met hers. "I have the resources, Emma, but not the vision. That's where you come in." As they stood in the cavernous main floor, sunlight streaming through broken windows, Emma felt something shift inside her, a recognition that perhaps her path had been leading here all along. "What would you call it?" she asked, beginning to envision the possibilities. Jackson smiled. "The Three Sisters Project, because everything changed when 3 brave little girls knocked on your back door." 6 months had passed since that day. At the warehouse, and the Three Sisters Project was rapidly taking shape. The once abandoned building now hummed with activity as construction crews transformed the space according to Emma's vision and Jackson's resources. Emma stood in what would soon be the community center's main hall, clipboard in hand as she reviewed the progress with the site manager. Sunlight streamed through newly installed windows, illuminating the potential of what this place could become. "Ms. Chase? Mr. Reynolds is here to see you," an assistant called from the doorway. Emma turned to see Jackson walking toward her. 3 excited girls trailing behind him. School had ended early today, and he'd brought them to see the latest developments in the project that bore their name. "Emma!" Hazel cried, running ahead to wrap her arms around Emma's waist. At 7 now, she'd grown an inch since spring and had lost her first tooth the previous week, an event Emma had been summoned to witness with all appropriate ceremony. "The place looks amazing," Jackson said, gazing around at the transformation. "You've accomplished more in 6 months than most of my development projects do in a year." "That's because we're not building luxury condos," Emma replied with a smile. "People are eager to help when it's for children." The changes weren't limited to the warehouse. Emma had witnessed the gradual rebuilding of a family over these months, the tentative bonds strengthening day by day. Sophie had blossomed in her new school, revealing a gift for mathematics that astonished her teachers. Hazel had made friends quickly, her natural exuberance returning after years of necessary caution. And Lily, perhaps the most remarkable transformation of all, had slowly lowered her defenses. She still maintained a watchful eye over her sisters, but there was room now for other things: art classes that nurtured her talent, therapy sessions that helped her process her grief, and most surprisingly, a growing connection with her father. "Can we show Emma what we made for the new rooms?" Sophie asked, bouncing on her toes. Jackson nodded, and Lily carefully produced a large portfolio from her backpack. Inside were 3 painted canvases, one from each sister, designed to hang in the children's recreation area of the community center. "These are beautiful," Emma said, genuinely impressed by the artwork. Lily's piece showed 3 small figures holding hands against a vibrant cityscape. "They'll be perfect for the space." After touring the construction site, they walked to a nearby park. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching beneath their feet as Hazel and Sophie raced ahead to the playground. "I have those funding proposals ready for you to review," Emma told Jackson as they settled on a bench watching the younger girls climb on the jungle gym. "It can wait until tomorrow," Jackson replied, his attention focused on his daughters. Today is about family. The word hung between them, weighted with meaning. Over these months, Emma had become an integral part of their lives, spending weekends at the penthouse, helping with homework, and navigating the complex emotional territory of 3 children healing from profound loss. Lily had wandered to a nearby tree, seemingly lost in thought. Jackson watched her with a mixture of pride and lingering sadness. "She still keeps a distance," he observed quietly. "She's made incredible progress," Emma reminded him. "Remember how she wouldn't even speak to you directly 6 months ago?" As if sensing they were talking about her, Lily glanced over. To Emma's surprise, the girl began walking toward Jackson instead of her, determination in her step. "Dad?" Lily said, the word still new on her tongue. She'd only recently begun calling him that, each utterance a gift that visibly moved Jackson. "Could you help me with something?" "Anything," Jackson replied, perhaps too eagerly. "I want to enter the city art competition, but the form needs a parent's signature." She held out a crumpled application. "Would you sign it?" Such a simple request, but Emma saw the profound significance of the moment. Lily wasn't just asking for a signature. She was acknowledging Jackson as her father, accepting his place in her life. "I'd be honored," Jackson said, his voice thick with emotion. From the playground, Hazel's voice suddenly rang out. "Dad, look at me." All 3 turned to see Hazel at the top of the slide waving proudly. It was the first time she had called him Dad unprompted, the word falling naturally from her lips as if she'd been saying it her entire life. The look on Jackson's face was worth all the heartache that had come before. A man who had found what he had been searching for, not just his children, but his place in their hearts. That night, as Emma prepared to leave the penthouse after dinner, Jackson walked her to the elevator. Something had shifted between them too, an unspoken current that neither had been brave enough to acknowledge. "Stay," he said simply, the word encompassing far more than just that evening. Emma hesitated, the complications of their situation weighing on her mind. "It's not that simple, Jackson." "It could be," he countered, his eyes sincere. "The girls need you, and I—" He paused, vulnerable in a way the powerful businessman rarely allowed himself to be. "I need you too." Before Emma could respond, the elevator doors opened, offering an escape from a conversation she wasn't ready to have. As October arrived, bringing a chill to the New York air, an important date approached on the family calendar, Lily's 13th birthday. The first milestone celebration since the sisters had come to live with Jackson, it carried a weight of expectation that had him unusually anxious. "I've reserved the rooftop garden at the Meridian," Jackson told Emma as they walked through the nearly completed community center. "Their event planner is handling everything: decorations, entertainment, catering." Emma glanced at him sideways. "Did you ask Lily what she wanted for her birthday?" Jackson faltered. "I assumed every 13-year-old would want a spectacular party. I've invited her classmates, some business associates with children her age." "Jackson," Emma said gently, "this is Lily we're talking about. The girl who spent years protecting her sisters from the world. Has she ever struck you as someone who enjoys being the center of attention among strangers?" His face fell as recognition dawned. "I've made a mistake, haven't I?" "Maybe just talk to her," Emma suggested. "Ask her what would make her birthday special." That evening, Jackson found Lily sketching by the window of her bedroom, the Manhattan skyline her backdrop. 6 months had softened the wariness in her eyes, but there remained a thoughtfulness beyond her years. "Lily, about your birthday next week?" he began. She looked up, her expression guarded. "The big party at the Meridian? Sophie told me." "Would you like something different?" he asked carefully. "It's your day, after all." Lily set down her sketchbook. "I don't want a big party with people I barely know," she admitted. "For my last birthday, Mom was in the hospital. We had cupcakes in her room with Emma. It wasn't much, but—" her voice trailed off. "But it was family," Jackson finished for her. Lily nodded. "Just us and Emma. That's all I want." The morning of Lily's birthday, Jackson canceled the elaborate event with a single phone call. Instead, he arranged something far simpler, a picnic in Central Park, with a checkered blanket spread beneath golden autumn trees. Sophie and Hazel helped prepare sandwiches. Lily's favorite cookies were packed in a basket, and a small chocolate cake waited in a box. When they arrived at the park, Emma was already waiting, a wrapped gift in her hands. The five of them settled. On the blanket, an unlikely family formed through loss and hope and stubborn perseverance. "This is perfect," Lily said softly, looking around at the circle of faces she had come to trust. After cake and presents, as Sophie and Hazel chased falling leaves nearby, Lily reached into her backpack and pulled out a carefully wrapped package. "I made something for you," she told Jackson, uncharacteristic nervousness in her voice. Inside was a framed drawing, the three sisters standing beside Jackson and Emma, all holding hands. Across the bottom, in Lily's precise lettering, were the words, "The Reynolds family." "It's the first time I've used that name," Lily explained, watching his reaction carefully. "Mom will always be part of us, but I think maybe we can be Reynolds too." Jackson stared at the drawing, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. In 6 short months, they had traveled light years from that first tense meeting in the diner. "Thank you," he finally managed, his voice thick with emotion. "This means everything to me." As the afternoon light faded to early evening, Jackson looked around at his makeshift family, Emma helping Hazel collect colorful leaves, Sophie explaining a math concept she'd learned in school, and Lily, finally allowing herself to be simply a 13-year-old girl on her birthday. The journey wasn't over, but they had found their way to solid ground. The new year had brought a renewed sense of purpose as the Three Sisters project prepared for its official opening. Emma had transitioned from waitress to foundation director, a transformation that still sometimes left her dizzy with disbelief. The girls were thriving in their new schools, and Jackson had restructured his business to allow more family time. A snowy January morning, Emma arrived at the penthouse for their weekly planning breakfast to find Jackson, staring grimly at his tablet. "What's wrong?" she asked, immediately sensing his tension. "This," he said, sliding the tablet toward her. The headline made her blood run cold. "Hidden Agenda. Waitress with foster system past orchestrates reunion of billionaire with long-lost daughters." The article detailed Emma's childhood in foster care, insinuating she had manipulated the situation for financial gain. Anonymous sources claimed she had known about Jackson's search for his daughters long before their chance meeting at the diner. "It's all lies," Emma whispered, her hands shaking. "Of course it is," Jackson agreed, his voice tight with anger. "My legal team is already working to have it retracted." Before they could discuss further, Lily burst into the room, eyes wild with panic. "Is it true?" she demanded, thrusting her phone at Emma. "Did you know about us all along? Was everything just a setup to get close to Dad's money?" "Lily, no," Emma began, but the girl was already backing away. "I trusted you," Lily whispered, her voice breaking. "We all did." Before either adult could stop her, Lily grabbed her coat and fled the apartment. The elevator doors closed on her tear-streaked face as Jackson lunged forward too late. "I'll find her," he promised Emma, already dialing security. She couldn't have gone far. But as hours passed with no sign of Lily, panic set in. Sophie and Hazel huddled together on the sofa while Emma and Jackson coordinated with police, private security, and Jackson's investigator. She's been gone 8 hours, Emma said, staring out at the darkening city. Snow was falling heavily now, temperatures dropping dangerously low. Where would she go? A sudden realization struck her. The overpass? Their old shelter? Within minutes, they were in Jackson's car fighting through snowbound traffic toward Brooklyn. The spot beneath the BQE where the sisters had once sought refuge was now nearly unrecognizable, just another shadowy corner in a city of millions. "Lily," Emma called, her voice swallowed by the wind. "Lily, please." Jackson followed, his expensive shoes sinking into dirty slush. "We're not angry," he added. "We just want you safe." A small movement caught Emma's eye, a flash of color in the shadows. There, huddled against a concrete pillar, was Lily, her coat pulled tight around her thin frame, eyes red from crying. "Go away," she said when they approached. "I don't want to talk to either of you." Emma crouched beside her, ignoring the biting cold. "Then don't talk. Just listen. Everything in that article about me is a lie. I never knew about you or your father until that day in the diner." "Why should I believe you?" Lily challenged, though her defiance was weakened by the tremor in her voice. Emma took a deep breath. "Because I never knew my biological father either." She glanced at Jackson before continuing. "I grew up in the system, bounced between foster homes until I aged out at 18. The one thing I always wanted was to belong somewhere. With someone. Jackson." Knelt in the snow beside them, heedless of his ruined suit. "The article was a hit piece from a rival developer who's angry about the foundation," he explained gently. "He's using you girls to try to hurt my business." Lily's hard expression began to crumble. "I was so scared," she admitted, "that this was all too good to be true, that we'd lose everything again." "You will never lose me," Jackson promised, his voice fierce with conviction. "You're my daughter. Nothing can change that." Emma reached for Lily's cold hand. "And you three gave me something I never had either, a family. I would never jeopardize that." As snowflakes swirled around them, an unlikely family huddled together beneath the same bridge that had once been the sisters' only shelter, finding, in that cold and forgotten place, the warmth of truth and reconciliation. A light snow dusted the grounds outside the newly renovated Three Sisters Project building as the crowd gathered for the grand opening ceremony. What had once been an abandoned warehouse was now a beacon of hope, its brick facade restored, windows gleaming, and a colorful mural of 3 girls holding hands spanning one entire wall. In the front row, Lily, Sophie, and Hazel sat together, dressed in matching blue dresses chosen for the occasion. 1 year had passed since that fateful meeting at Sunshine Diner, a year of healing, growth, and the careful construction of a family once thought irreparably broken. As Jackson stepped up to the podium, Emma watched from the side, pride swelling in her chest. The man who had once been defined solely by his wealth and business acumen now stood before the community as something far more important: a father, a philanthropist, a man transformed by love. "A year ago," Jackson began, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes, "I was a man who had everything the world values: money, power, success, and nothing that truly matters. I had spent 6 years searching for my daughters, never knowing if I would find them." He paused, his gaze finding his 3 girls in the audience. "What I never expected was that they would find me, not just physically, but they would find the father I was meant to be. They would teach me what no business school ever could, that true wealth is measured in moments of connection, in overcoming fear with trust, in choosing to love even when it's difficult." The crowd was silent, captivated by the raw honesty in his words. Among them sat Frank from the diner, beaming with pride at Emma, and teachers from the girls' schools, and dozens of families who would soon benefit from the center's programs. "This project," Jackson continued, gesturing to the building behind him, "is named for 3 extraordinary young women who survived unimaginable challenges with courage and grace. But it's also named for the 3 pillars we believe can transform lives: safety, opportunity, and belonging." As Jackson finished his speech to enthusiastic applause, Emma noticed Lily whispering something to her sisters. The three girls nodded in agreement before Lily raised her hand. "I think my daughter has something to say," Jackson announced, surprise evident in his voice. Lily approached the podium, her initial nervousness giving way to determination as she faced the crowd. At 13, she stood taller now, her shoulders straight, her eyes clear and focused. "A year ago," she began, echoing her father's opening, "my sisters and I were hungry and afraid. Our mom had died, and we thought we were completely alone in the world." Her voice trembled slightly, but she continued. "What saved us wasn't just food or shelter. It was a waitress who saw us when we were invisible to everyone else. It was a father who never stopped looking for us even when everyone told him to give up." She looked directly at Emma, then at Jackson. "I used to think family was just who you're born to. Now I know it's the people who choose you, again and again, even when it's hard. It's the ones who stay when it would be easier to walk away." As Lily finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Sophie and Hazel rushed forward to join their sister at the podium, followed by Jackson, who wrapped all three in his embrace. Emma remained at the side, watching the family portrait, with a full heart, until Hazel spotted her and called out, "Emma, you too, you're part of our family." As Emma joined their embrace, Jackson reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. The crowd gasped collectively as he dropped to one knee. "Emma Chase," he said, his voice clear despite the emotion. "You saw my daughters when they were invisible. You loved them when they had nothing to offer but themselves, and you taught me how to be the father they deserved. Will you complete our family and marry me?" Before Emma could answer, Hazel tugged at her sleeve and whispered loudly enough for the microphone to catch, "Say yes. We need a mom." Laughter rippled through the crowd as Emma knelt to be at eye level with the girls. "Is that what you all want?" she asked them, her voice gentle. Three heads nodded emphatically. "Then yes," Emma said, rising to meet Jackson's gaze. "Yes to all of you." As snowflakes danced around the newly engaged couple and the three sisters who had brought them together, the story that began with hunger and separation closed its circle with fullness and belonging. A family forged not by obligation, but by choice, by love that persisted even in the darkest of times. Millionaire didn't know he had a son until he saw the bracelet he gave his ex on a poor 11-year-old girl's wrist. Comment below where in the world you're watching from, and get ready for a story that will touch your heart. The morning sun glinted off the floor-to-ceiling windows of Jason Miller's penthouse, painting golden streaks across imported marble floors. At 42, Jason had mastered the art of efficiency. Even sleep was scheduled to precision. His alarm chimed at exactly 5:30 a.m., though he'd already been awake for 7 minutes, staring at the ocean view that had cost him more than most people earned in a lifetime. "Good morning, Mr. Miller." His personal assistant's voice came through the integrated home system. "Today's schedule includes the quarterly board meeting at 8:30, followed by the acquisition briefing at 10:15. The legal team needs your signature on the Thompson deal by noon, and—" "Send the Thompson papers to my office," Jason interrupted, already moving toward his immaculate bathroom. "I'll review them before the board meeting." Within 30 minutes, Jason was dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, his reflection in the mirror showing a man at the peak of professional success. His face, handsome in a stern, unyielding way, revealed little of the emptiness that had begun to hollow him from within. The elevator descended silently to the private garage where his driver waited. "Morning, sir," the man said, opening the door to the sleek black sedan. Jason nodded curtly, already scanning emails on his tablet. There was no time for pleasantries in the life of a CEO worth billions. At Miller Technologies headquarters, employees straightened as he strode through the main floor, his presence causing a ripple of tension. In the 12 years since founding, the company Jason had cultivated a reputation for brilliant vision coupled with merciless precision. Failure was unacceptable. Excellence was merely expected. The projections looked promising, his CFO reported during the board meeting, gesturing to charts that showed consistently climbing profits. Q4 should exceed expectations by approximately 12%. Jason listened, asked pointed questions, made swift decisions that would affect thousands of lives, all without a flicker of doubt or hesitation. This was what he had built his life for: complete control, unquestionable success. Yet later that night, standing alone in his penthouse with a glass of 30-year-old scotch, Jason found himself once again staring at the glittering city below. The empire he had built spread before him. Buildings bearing his company's logo, products used in millions of homes, a name recognized globally. He took a sip of the amber liquid, savoring its complexity. Strange how even the finest scotch tasted somehow hollow when drunk alone night after night. The thought came unbidden, unwelcome. Jason Miller had everything money could buy, everything ambition could achieve. So why did it all feel like nothing at all? Jason Miller's morning routine was interrupted by an urgent call from his PR director. "The Forbes profile just went live, sir. It's quite flattering." Minutes later, Jason stared at his own face on the digital cover, stern eyes looking directly into the camera, the Manhattan skyline behind him. The headline read, "The Algorithm King: How Jason Miller Built a $17 billion Empire from a Dorm." Room Dream. The article chronicled his journey from scholarship student to tech magnate with almost reverent detail. It praised his surgical business acumen and uncompromising pursuit of excellence. The writer had even unearthed anecdotes from his college days: how he'd worked 3 jobs while maintaining a perfect GPA, how he'd turned down a prestigious internship to launch his first startup. What the article failed to mention were the costs, the friendships that withered from neglect, the family holidays missed for business trips, the relationships abandoned when they threatened to compete with his ambition. Jason scrolled to a paragraph about his legendary focus. "Success requires sacrifice," he'd been quoted saying. "You have to decide what matters most." He closed the article and gazed out his office window. Had he really decided? Or had he simply defaulted to the path of least emotional risk? That evening, the company's board hosted a celebration dinner at an exclusive restaurant overlooking Boston Harbor. Crystal glasses clinked as executives toasted their visionary leader. "To Jason," his CFO declared, "who's made us all very rich by never having a life." Laughter rippled around the table. Jason forced a smile, but the words lingered like smoke in his lungs. Later, as waiters cleared dessert plates, the conversation turned to families and vacation plans. Jason listened as his executives shared stories of children's graduations, anniversary trips, weekend sailing adventures. "What about you, Jason?" someone asked. "All work and no play?" He gave his practiced answer about an upcoming industry conference in Tokyo. But for the first time, the words tasted strange in his mouth. Back in his penthouse, Jason poured himself a scotch and pulled up the Forbes article again. Between paragraphs praising his business genius were photos from various stages of his career, always alone, always working. No wedding pictures, no family portraits, no evidence of a life beyond Miller Technologies. He thought of Elizabeth then, not intentionally, but like muscle memory. Elizabeth Reynolds with her artist's hands and uncompromising honesty. The woman who'd once told him, "Your ambition is both your greatest strength and your prison, Jason." He dismissed her concern then, certain he could have it all eventually. First success, then happiness. First the empire, then the life. 12 years later, he had the empire, but where was the life? Jason's phone buzzed with an urgent email from the Tokyo team. He reflexively reached for it, then stopped, his hand suspended in midair. When had work become his reflex, his comfort, his escape? When had it become everything? The realization crept over him like a shadow. Success had become his addiction, achievement his drug of choice. While he'd been busy conquering markets and crushing competitors, life had been passing him by, one missed moment at a time. The Forbes article ended with speculation about Jason's next big move. Whatever Miller targets next will undoubtedly transform the industry, the writer had predicted confidently. Jason stared at the words, feeling something unfamiliar crack inside him. What if his next move had nothing to do with business at all? He dismissed the thought immediately. This momentary discontent was nothing, just fatigue from the Tokyo negotiations, perhaps too much scotch. Tomorrow he would be focused again, driven again. Yet as he prepared for bed precisely at 10:15 as always, the CFO's toast echoed in his mind. Never having a life. Is that how they saw him? Is that who he had become? And more troubling still, was it too late to become someone else? Jason was leaving a technology conference when he heard a familiar voice calling his name. Miller! Jason Miller, is that you? Turned to see Thomas Chen, his former college roommate, pushing through the crowd. The years had added silver to Thomas's temples and weight to his frame, but his smile remained unchanged. Thomas, Jason said, automatically extending his hand. It's been, 10 years? At least. How's life at the top? Thomas laughed, but his eyes were kind. I saw your Forbes cover. You certainly made good on those big plans of yours. They exchanged pleasantries, Thomas sharing stories about his modest engineering firm and his family. 3 kids, a house in the suburbs, a golden retriever named Einstein. Jason listened, offering carefully curated highlights of his own achievements. As they prepared to part ways, Thomas asked, Do you ever hear from Elizabeth Reynolds? You two were inseparable back then. The name hit Jason like a physical blow. Elizabeth? No, we lost touch after graduation. Shame, Thomas said. You guys seemed perfect together. She became quite the respected art teacher from what I heard. Well, good seeing you, Jason. Don't be a stranger. That night, Jason found himself pulling a lockbox from the back of his closet. He hadn't opened it in years, yet the combination came to his fingers without hesitation. Inside lay the carefully preserved artifacts of a different life. Concert tickets, handwritten letters, photographs. One photo in particular caught his attention. Jason and Elizabeth at Walden Pond, her auburn hair catching the sunlight, his arms wrapped around her as they laughed at something now forgotten. They looked impossibly young, impossibly happy. Jason remembered that day with painful clarity. They'd skipped classes to spend the afternoon by the water, Elizabeth sketching the landscape while he outlined his business ideas. We'll change the world together, he had promised. Your art, my technology, a perfect match. He set the photo aside and reached for the small jewelry box at the bottom of the lockbox. It was empty now, but he remembered what it had held. Custom sapphire bracelet with their initials discreetly engraved on the clasp. A parting gift he'd given Elizabeth the day everything changed. That day had begun with celebration. Jason had received an offer from a venture capitalist, significant funding for his startup, but with a catch. He would need to relocate to Silicon Valley immediately. It's just temporary, he'd assured Elizabeth. A year, maybe 2. Then we can be together again. But Elizabeth had seen through him, as she always did. This is just the beginning, Jason. There will always be another deal, another opportunity, another reason to put our life together on hold. I'm doing this for us, he'd insisted. No, she'd said quietly. You're doing it for yourself. And that's okay. But let's not pretend it's something else. She'd handed him back the bracelet. I can't be the thing you return to when you've conquered the world, Jason. I need to be the world you're building alongside. He'd left the next day, convinced he could have both, the success and the relationship. By the time he realized Elizabeth had been right, too much time had passed, too many opportunities to choose differently. Now, alone in his penthouse, Jason searched Elizabeth's name online. He found articles about her teaching career, an award she'd received for arts education, photographs of exhibits she'd organized. The most recent information was from 2 years ago, then nothing. It was as if she'd vanished, leaving Jason with nothing but memories and the hollow ache of what might have been. The labor practices scandal is hurting our public image, Mr. Miller, said Rebecca Liu, Miller Technologies' head of public relations. We need to demonstrate corporate responsibility. Jason frowned at the data on his tablet. The expose about working conditions in their overseas facilities had caused a 7% drop in stock value and endless social media outrage. What do you suggest? He asked, already impatient with this distraction from actual business. Rebecca outlined several options, but it was Marcus Jenkins, Jason's longtime friend and legal counsel, who offered the winning idea. A mentorship program, Marcus said, leaning forward. Tech education for underprivileged youth. It's personal, impactful, and directly addresses the heartless tech giant narrative. Jason immediately shook his head. I don't have time to babysit teenagers. You wouldn't need much involvement, Rebecca assured him. Just attend the launch, maybe a few photo ops. And if you actually showed up for the mentoring once in a while, it wouldn't hurt, Marcus added with a knowing smile. Later, alone with Jason in his office, Marcus dropped the PR facade. Look, you need this, not just the company, you. Since when are you my therapist? Jason asked, irritated. Since Harvard, when I watched you transform from an actual human into whatever. Marcus gestured vaguely at Jason. This is. When was the last time you did something that wasn't about making money or crushing competitors? Jason had no answer. 2 weeks later, the future digital project was announced with considerable fanfare. Jason insisted on strict parameters. The program would focus exclusively on technology and entrepreneurship, subjects he understood, and his personal involvement would be minimal. I'll provide funding and curriculum guidance, he told the planning committee. But I have a company to run. The committee nodded, already accustomed to the limitations of working with corporate donors. Only Sofia Garcia, the community center director, seemed unimpressed by his conditions. These kids don't need another distant benefactor throwing money at them, she said during a planning session. They need actual mentors who show up. Jason bristled at her directness. Ms. Garcia, I assure you my financial contribution is very generous, she interrupted, but money doesn't teach kids to code. People do. Her words stayed with him, an irritating splinter in his otherwise orderly thoughts. When Marcus sent him the PR schedule that included monthly visits to the center, Jason didn't immediately reject it as he would have before. Instead, he found himself remembering his own youth, the community college professor who'd first introduced him to programming, the hours he'd spent in the computer lab because the apartment he shared with his mother couldn't afford decent internet. Fine, he finally told Marcus. I'll do the minimum required participation, but don't expect me to suddenly become some inspirational figure to these kids. I'm a businessman, not a teacher. Marcus smiled knowingly. Of course, Jason. Whatever you say. The launch of the Future Digital project attracted more media attention than Jason had anticipated. Business journals praised Miller Technologies for its progressive approach to corporate responsibility, while local papers featured photographs of Jason standing awkwardly beside excited teenagers. The carefully choreographed event was proceeding exactly as planned, until a reporter from the Boston Chronicle raised her hand. Mr. Miller, she called out, what in your own childhood inspired you to create this opportunity for disadvantaged youth? Jason froze momentarily. His PR team had prepared him for questions about the program's goals and metrics, not personal inquiries. I believe in the transformative power of technology, he answered mechanically. It's important that all young people have access to the tools that will shape tomorrow's economy, the reporter persisted. But what personal connection do you have to these communities? What drives you to help these specific children? Jason felt a trickle of sweat down his back. I simply recognize talent can come from anywhere, he said, his voice unnaturally stiff. Our company benefits when we expand the talent pool. Even to his own ears, the words sounded hollow, a corporate platitude rather than a human response. That night, alone in his penthouse, Jason poured himself a larger scotch than usual. The reporter's questions had unearthed memories he preferred to keep buried. He remembered his mother, Elena Miller, working 3 jobs to keep them afloat after his father abandoned them. He remembered the shame of free lunch vouchers, the apartment with perpetually broken heating, the nights his mother fell asleep at the kitchen table, exhausted from her endless shifts. He remembered vowing at 12 years old that he would never be dependent on anyone, that he would build a fortress around himself so secure that nothing, and no one, could ever make him vulnerable again. That fortress now stretched 52 stories into the Boston skyline, housed over 5,000 employees, and generated billions in revenue. By any objective measure, Jason had succeeded beyond his wildest childhood dreams. Yet standing at his window, glass in hand, he confronted an uncomfortable truth. His fortress had become his prison. He had built walls so impenetrable that nothing could hurt him, yes, but nothing could reach him either. The teenagers at the community center had looked at him today with a mixture of awe and suspicion, sensing perhaps that his presence among them was merely transactional. Another business deal, another performance. For the first time in years, Jason wondered if the life he had constructed was actually the one he wanted. If the success he had achieved at such cost was truly success at all. "You're being ridiculous," he muttered to himself, draining his glass. "This is exactly what you worked for." But as he prepared for bed with his usual precision, a small, persistent voice whispered that perhaps he had been working for the wrong things all along. Jason arrived at the community center for his first mentoring session with the precision of a military operation. His assistant had scheduled exactly 60 minutes, his driver waited outside, and his talking points had been meticulously prepared by the PR team. What he hadn't prepared for was the actual teenagers. 20 pairs of eyes studied him as he entered the computer lab, some with naked curiosity, others with thinly veiled skepticism. These weren't the polished business school graduates he usually addressed. They were high schoolers with backpacks, smartphones, and the unnerving ability to detect inauthenticity from 50 paces. "Welcome, Mr. Miller," Sofia Garcia said with professional courtesy, though Jason detected a hint of challenge in her tone. "The students are eager to learn from your expertise." He cleared his throat and launched into his prepared speech about entrepreneurship and wealth building. He showed slides of exponential growth curves and market penetration metrics. He quoted the same financial advice he'd given at executive retreats. "By focusing on scalable solutions and investor-ready concepts," he explained, clicking to the next slide, "each of you could potentially become millionaires before age 30. The room remained silent. Jason, accustomed to audiences hanging on his every word, felt an unfamiliar discomfort. Finally, a girl in the back row raised her hand. "Mr. Miller, can I ask you something?" "Of course," Jason replied, relieved at the engagement. "Are you happy?" The simplicity of the question caught him completely off guard. That's not relevant to today's topic." "But isn't it?" the girl persisted. "What's the point of being rich if you're miserable?" Jason glanced at his watch. "I think we should focus on practical skills rather than philosophical questions." Thankfully, Sophia intervened, directing students to turn on their computers for a coding exercise. Jason retreated to the perimeter of the room, his fortress of business expertise suddenly useless in this unfamiliar territory. As the session concluded, Jason made a hasty exit, nodding curtly to Sophia's, "See you next month." In the sanctuary of his car, he exhaled deeply, surprisingly exhausted from the brief encounter. "How'd it go, sir?" his driver, Ramon, asked. "Fine," Jason replied automatically. Ramon nodded, pulling into traffic. After a few minutes of silence, he ventured, "My daughter's about their age, 17, smart as a whip." Before Jason could shut down the conversation, Ramon was already reaching for his wallet, flipping it open to show a photograph of a smiling girl in graduation robes. "Valedictorian," Ramon said, his voice thick with pride. "First in our family to go to college." Jason studied the man's face, transformed by simple joy. When was the last time he, Jason Miller, had felt that kind of uncomplicated pride in another person? Had he ever? Back in his penthouse, unable to focus on the quarterly reports, Jason found himself typing Elizabeth Reynolds Boston into a search engine. The results showed her professional achievements, an arts education award, gallery exhibitions she'd curated, a profile in an education journal praising her innovative teaching methods. The most recent information was from 2 years ago, an announcement that she'd received tenure at a prestigious arts high school in Boston. After that, nothing. It was as if she'd vanished from the digital world. Jason stared at her photograph on the school's faculty page. Her auburn hair was shorter than he remembered, elegant silver streaks now framing her face, but her eyes still held that same intensity, the gaze that had once seen through all his careful defenses. What would Elizabeth think of him now? Would she recognize anything of the young man she had loved in the billionaire he had become? The question lingered, unanswered, as the city lights blinked on outside his window. Jason returned to the community center with a completely different approach. Gone were the investor pitches and wealth-building strategies. Instead, he brought practical coding exercises, real-world problem-solving challenges, and, most surprising to himself, a genuine curiosity about these young people. "Today we're going to build a simple app," he announced, feeling strangely nervous. "Something that solves a real problem in your daily lives." The students, initially wary, gradually warmed to his more hands-on approach. Jason moved through the room answering questions, offering suggestions, finding himself increasingly engaged in their creative solutions. "Mr. Miller," called a thin boy with glasses too large for his face, "could you look at my code? It keeps crashing." Jason pulled up a chair beside him. Michael Torres, according to the name tag, had attempted an ambitious project, a scheduling app that incorporated public transportation delays. "You're thinking like a real programmer," Jason said, scanning the code. "The problem is here. You're not accounting for this variable to be empty sometimes." Together they fixed the bug, Michael's face lighting up when the program finally ran correctly. "That's so cool. I've been stuck on that for days." The genuine excitement in the boy's voice triggered something unexpected in Jason, a warm satisfaction entirely different from closing a billion-dollar deal or outmaneuvering a competitor. "You remind me of myself at your age," Jason found himself saying. "Always tackling the most complicated problem in the room." Michael looked up, surprised. "You weren't always, you know." "Rich?" Jason finished with an unexpected smile. "No. I grew up in a one-bedroom apartment with my mom. We were on assistance programs. My first computer was salvaged from a dumpster behind the community college." The words had escaped before Jason could censor them. He never discussed his background, not with employees, not with the press, not even with Marcus most of the time. Michael studied him with new interest. "For real? So how did you—" "Hard work, some lucky breaks, and a lot of all-nighters," Jason answered, then added something he'd never acknowledged aloud. "And plenty of mistakes along the way." By the session's end, Jason had connected with several students, particularly Michael, whose raw talent reminded him painfully of his younger self. To his own surprise, when Sophia mentioned an upcoming coding competition the students were entering, Jason immediately offered to help them prepare. "That would mean coming in twice a month instead of once," Sophia pointed out, not bothering to hide her surprise. "I'll make it work," Jason replied. Back at Miller Technologies headquarters, his executive team noticed the subtle changes. His assistant was baffled when Jason instructed her to keep the mentoring sessions as immovable appointments in his schedule. His CFO raised eyebrows when Jason delayed a potential acquisition discussion to attend the students' competition. "What's gotten into you?" Marcus asked over their weekly lunch. "First you reschedule the Tokyo investors, now you're personally overseeing this mentorship program. Are you having some kind of midlife awakening?" "Don't be dramatic," Jason replied, but without his usual edge. "I'm simply ensuring the company's philanthropy efforts are effective." Marcus studied him thoughtfully. "Well, whatever it is, keep it up. You seem almost human lately." The comment would have annoyed Jason before. Now he simply shrugged, his thoughts already turning to Michael's coding project and how to help him optimize it. Jason found himself checking his calendar more frequently as each mentoring session approached. The program, once a PR obligation, had somehow become the highlight of his otherwise regimented week. He had upgraded the center's aging computers with state-of-the-art equipment, recruited top programmers from his company to provide additional support, and even established a scholarship fund for students who wanted to pursue tech careers after graduation. "You're really invested in this program," Sophia observed one afternoon as they watched the students work. "I have to admit, I didn't see that coming." Jason glanced at her, noting for the first time the warm intelligence in her dark eyes. Neither did I, he admitted. What changed? The question was direct, like everything about Sofia Garcia. Unlike his business associates who carefully measured every word in his presence, she spoke to him as if his net worth were irrelevant. They remind me that technology isn't just about market share and profit margins, Jason said after a moment. It's about possibility, creation. I'd forgotten that somewhere along the way. Sofia studied him thoughtfully. Most corporate sponsors write checks and attend galas. They don't roll up their sleeves and teach debugging techniques to teenagers. Most corporate sponsors probably didn't learn coding in community centers, Jason heard himself say. A look of genuine surprise crossed Sofia's face. You never mention that in your interviews. It doesn't fit the image, he replied with unexpected candor. After the session ended, they walked together to the center's small kitchen. As Jason helped himself to coffee, Sofia leaned against the counter. I grew up in a similar program in East Harlem, she said. Single mom, 4 kids, endless bills. These arts and education programs were my lifeline. Jason nodded, sensing she was offering something personal in exchange for his earlier vulnerability. I never felt like I belonged in the academic world, she continued. Too brown, too poor, too. She gestured vaguely. Real. But one mentor saw something in me, pushed me to apply to colleges I thought were impossible dreams. Clearly they weren't impossible, Jason observed. No, just terrifying. Her smile was both wry and genuine. I spent my first 2 years at Columbia, feeling like an imposter, like someone would finally realize I didn't belong and kick me out. Jason felt a strange ripple of recognition. I know exactly what you mean. Sofia looked genuinely surprised. You? The tech billionaire? Especially me, he replied quietly. Success doesn't cure that feeling. Sometimes it makes it worse. The moment hung between them, a bridge of unexpected understanding. Jason felt oddly exposed, yet not uncomfortable. When was the last time he'd had a conversation this honest with anyone? Later that week, during a crucial strategy meeting, Jason found his thoughts drifting to Sofia's passionate defense of a student who was struggling with advanced concepts, but refusing to give up. The elegant solution she'd helped the girl discover. The pride in both their faces when the program finally ran correctly. Mr. Miller, his CFO prompted. Your thoughts on the Asian market expansion? Jason blinked, returning to the boardroom. Let's revisit the projections, he said automatically, but part of his mind remained at the community center. A distraction, unprecedented in his meticulously controlled life. Jason stood in his bathroom, staring at his reflection with unfamiliar scrutiny. The face looking back at him belonged to a successful CEO, confident, controlled, impeccably groomed. Yet lately, he'd begun to wonder if this carefully crafted exterior housed a stranger. Who are you really? He murmured to his reflection. The question had first surfaced during yesterday's mentoring session. Michael and the other students had been discussing their future dreams with surprising clarity. I want to build accessibility software, Michael had said. My sister's blind and most tech isn't designed for her. Another student wanted to create educational games for her younger siblings. A third dreamed of developing affordable medical diagnostics for communities like the one she grew up in. Each teenager had a purpose that extended beyond personal gain, a vision that connected to something larger than themselves. When one of them had innocently asked Jason, "What made you start your company?" He'd given his standard answer about market opportunities and technological innovation. But later, alone in his office, he confronted the question more honestly. What had been his true motivation? To prove his worth? To ensure he'd never be vulnerable again? To show everyone who'd ever underestimated him that they were wrong? All valid reasons perhaps, but hollow compared to the teenager's simple desire to help others. On impulse, Jason called Marcus. I'm thinking of reducing my operational role in the company, he said without preamble. A long pause followed. Who is this? And what have you done with Jason Miller? Marcus finally replied. I'm serious. I want to delegate more day-to-day operations, focus on bigger picture initiatives, and spend more time at the community center, though he didn't say this aloud. Are you having some kind of crisis? Marcus asked, only half joking. Maybe I'm just evolving, Jason replied. The changes began small but noticeable. Jason started leaving the office by 6 instead of 9. He delegated meetings he once would have insisted on handling personally. He even adopted a dog, a scrappy terrier mix from the local shelter that the adoption counselor described as particular about his people, but fiercely loyal once he trusts you. Sounds familiar, Jason had muttered, signing the adoption papers. Now Rocky slept on a plush bed in the corner of Jason's home office, his presence somehow making the penthouse feel less like a showcase and more like a home. The business press noticed the transformation. The Wall Street Journal ran a profile titled, "The Humanization of Boston's Tech Titan," noting Jason's increased philanthropic activities and more accessible public persona. When a prominent business magazine requested an interview about his personal evolution, Jason hesitated. What could he say? That mentoring underprivileged teenagers had made him question his entire value system? That he'd begun to wonder if his billions had cost him the only things that really mattered? That night, over drinks with Marcus, Jason admitted the truth he'd been avoiding. I still think about her. Marcus didn't need to ask who her was. Elizabeth? Jason nodded. Pathetic, right? 12 years later. Not pathetic, Marcus said quietly. Human. The community center buzzed with excitement. After months of hard work, the first cohort of the Future Digital project was graduating. Proud parents filled folding chairs, smartphones ready to capture their children's moment of achievement. Jason stood at the back of the room rehearsing his speech. He had written it himself, no PR team, no corporate messaging, just honest. Words about the journey he'd shared with these remarkable young people. As he scanned the audience, his gaze caught on an unfamiliar face in the last row. A girl, perhaps 11 or 12, sat alone, observing everything with keen intelligence. Something about her, the tilt of her head, the thoughtful intensity of her expression, triggered a strange sense of recognition in Jason, though he was certain they'd never met. After his speech and the presentation of certificates, Jason moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and posing for photos. He gradually worked his way toward the back of the room, curious about the solitary young observer. She was examining the students' projects displayed on tables around the perimeter, her slender fingers gently touching a robotic arm built by one of his mentees. That one responds to voice commands, Jason said, approaching carefully so as not to startle her. Michael built it for his sister. The girl looked up, her eyes widening slightly at being addressed by the event's keynote speaker. It's really clever, she said, her voice clear and confident. I like how he included tactile feedback. Jason was impressed by her vocabulary and insight. Are you interested in robotics? More digital art, actually, she replied, but I like seeing how different technologies can work together. My cousin Derek is in this program. He's the one who built the environmental monitoring system. Derek Williams. Jason nodded. Excellent spatial reasoning skills. The girl smiled, pleased by the recognition of her relative. He says you're a good teacher. Not boring like he expected a billionaire to be. Jason laughed, genuinely amused by the backhanded compliment. I'm glad I exceeded such low expectations. I'm Jason Miller. Harper Williams, she replied, extending her hand with surprising formality. As she reached out, the sleeve of her cardigan slipped back, revealing a flash of blue and silver at her wrist. Jason's world narrowed to a pinpoint, his breath catching. In his throat, a sapphire bracelet. Not just any bracelet, he would know that specific design anywhere. Custom made 12 years ago, with tiny initialed links that spelled J and E when arranged in sequence. That's a beautiful bracelet, he managed, his voice strangely hoarse. Harper glanced down, her expression softening. It was my mom's. She died 2 years ago. Her fingers touched the sapphires with gentle reverence. I'm only allowed to wear it for special occasions. Jason felt as though the floor beneath him had disappeared. Your mother, he said carefully. What was her name? Elizabeth, Harper replied. Elizabeth Reynolds, she was an art teacher. Jason somehow managed to finish the conversation with Harper, his voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside him. The moment she walked away to congratulate her cousin, he sought out Sophia, pulling her into an empty office. Harper, Williams, he said, his voice barely controlled. What do you know about her? Sophia frowned at his intensity. Derek's cousin? Not much. Her grandmother brings her to pick Derek up sometimes. Why? Her mother was Elizabeth Reynolds. Yes, I believe so. She passed away a couple of years ago. Car accident on Route 9 during a storm. Harper lives with her grandmother now. Jason, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost. In many ways, he had. I need to sit down, Jason said, suddenly unsteady. Once seated, he explained his history with Elizabeth, watching comprehension dawn on Sophia's face. The bracelet Harper wears. I had it custom made for Elizabeth 12 years ago. It has our initials hidden in the links. Sophia's eyes widened. And Harper is 11, Jason calculated quickly. She would be 11 now. The timing aligned perfectly with their breakup. If Elizabeth had discovered her pregnancy after he left. I need to know for certain, Jason said. But how? I can't exactly demand a DNA test from a child I just met. You need to tread very carefully, Sophia cautioned. This isn't a corporate takeover, Jason. This is a young girl who's already lost her mother. Over the following week, Jason initiated a discreet investigation. Birth records confirmed Harper's birth date, exactly 9 months after his departure for Silicon Valley. Elizabeth had listed no father on the birth certificate. He obtained a photograph of Harper as a toddler, gasping at the unmistakable resemblance to his own childhood pictures, the same determined set of the jaw, the same analytical gaze. The evidence was overwhelming, yet Jason oscillated between elation and rage. He had a daughter, a brilliant, articulate daughter he'd never known existed. Elizabeth had kept Harper from him for 11 years, denying them both a relationship that could never be recovered. One evening, unable to contain his turmoil, Jason drove to Mount Auburn Cemetery, where Elizabeth was buried. Standing before her, simple headstone rain soaking through his expensive coat, he finally unleashed the storm inside him. How could you? He demanded of the silent stone. You had no right to keep her from me. Was this punishment? Revenge for choosing my career? His anger gradually gave way to grief, not just for Elizabeth, but for the years lost with Harper, for the family they might have been. I would have come back, he whispered, rain mingling with tears on his face. If I'd known about her, I would have come back. As Jason left the cemetery, he noticed a car parked nearby. Inside sat Gloria Williams, Harper's grandmother, watching him with a mixture of suspicion and apprehension. She had recognized him from the graduation ceremony and followed him, protective, instincts on high alert. Their eyes met through the rain-streaked windshield, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The secret was unraveling. Jason consulted with both a family therapist and his most trusted attorneys before taking any action. This isn't a business acquisition, the therapist reminded him firmly. This is a child's life. With a carefully considered plan, Jason arranged a meeting with Gloria Williams at a neutral location, a quiet cafe near the community center. The elderly woman arrived precisely on time, her posture rigid with protective determination. I know who you are, Gloria said without preamble as she sat across from him. I've seen your face on magazines for years. I always wondered if you knew. I didn't, Jason replied simply. Not until I saw the bracelet. Gloria studied him with penetrating eyes reminiscent of her granddaughters. Elizabeth never told you? No, I left for California. The relationship ended. I had no idea she was pregnant. Gloria's expression softened slightly. She considered telling you, many times. I have a box of letters she wrote but never sent. Why didn't she? The question had tormented Jason for weeks. Gloria sighed, her eyes distant with memory. Elizabeth said you had made your choice, your career over a life with her. She didn't want you to feel obligated to a family you never chose. The words struck Jason like physical blows. Hadn't he insisted to Elizabeth that he was leaving for them? Yet she had seen through his ambitious rationalizations to the truth underneath. Would you have come back? Gloria asked, watching him carefully. If you had known? Jason considered the ambitious young man he'd been, so hungrily pursuing success. I want to say yes, he admitted. But I don't know. I was different then. His honesty seemed to earn a small measure of Gloria's respect. At least you're not lying to yourself, she observed. Elizabeth always said that was your best quality, when you allowed it. They spent the next hour discussing Harper, her intelligence, her artistic talent inherited from her mother, her stubborn determination so like her unknown father. Gloria shared photographs from Harper's childhood, each image a physical reminder of what Jason had missed. What do you want now? Gloria finally asked. Why reveal yourself after all this time? I want to know my daughter, Jason said simply. I can't get back the years I've lost, but I don't want to lose any more. Together with Sophia's help, they developed a careful plan to introduce Jason as Harper's father. He created a special digital art program at the community center, knowing it would draw Harper's interest. Over several sessions, he got to know her better, her love of animation, her thoughtful approach to creative problems, her quiet confidence. Gloria watched these interactions carefully, protective but increasingly reassured by Jason's genuine care for Harper's well-being.
She has your analytical mind, Gloria told him after one session. But Elizabeth's heart. Thank God for that. When the time finally came to tell Harper the truth, Jason was terrified in a way no business crisis had ever made him feel. They chose
a Saturday afternoon at Gloria's modest home, creating a safe space for whatever reaction might come. There's something important we need to tell you, Gloria began, sitting beside Harper on the worn living room sofa. Harper, Gloria began gently, you know how we've always talked about your mom and all the wonderful things about her, but we've never talked much about your father? Harper nodded, her intelligent eyes moving between her grandmother and Jason. There was already a suspicion growing there, a connection her quick mind was beginning to make. The truth is, Gloria continued, your mother made a decision years ago, a decision she thought was best at the time. Mr. Miller is my father, Harper said quietly, her gaze fixed on Jason. It wasn't a question. Jason felt his chest tighten. Yes, he confirmed, his voice barely steady. I am. Harper's expression cycled through multiple emotions, surprise, confusion, anger. Did you know? All this time? No, Jason answered honestly. I only realized when I saw the bracelet at the graduation ceremony, the one that belonged to your mother. Harper's hand moved protectively to her wrist where the sapphire bracelet rested. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't Mom tell me? Her voice rose slightly, trembling with emotion. Your mother thought she was protecting both of you. Gloria explained. Protecting us from what? Harper demanded, her eyes filling with tears. From knowing each other? That's not protection, that's... She stood suddenly, grabbing her backpack. I need to think. Before either adult could stop her, she rushed out the front door. Jason started to follow, but Gloria caught his arm. Give her a minute, I know where she'll go. 20 minutes later, Jason stood outside a modest apartment building where Elizabeth and Harper had lived before the accident. The property manager, recognizing Gloria, had reluctantly let them into the now vacant unit. They found Harper sitting in the empty living room, her back against the wall where faint marks still showed, where pictures had once hung. This was my home, she said, not looking up as they entered. With Mom. But it was all based on lies. Not lies, Jason said, carefully sitting across from her. Complicated choices. Your mother did what she thought was best. Why didn't you look for us? Harper asked, finally meeting his eyes with a directness that reminded him painfully of Elizabeth. I didn't know about you, Jason repeated. If I had, would you have come? The challenge in her voice was unmistakable. Jason hesitated, then chose honesty. I'd like to say yes immediately, but the truth is, I was different then, focused entirely on my career. Your mother knew that. Harper seemed to appreciate his candor. So what happens now? You found out you have a daughter and suddenly want to play family. I'd like to know you, Jason said simply. I've missed 11 years. I don't want to miss any more. But this has to happen at your pace, not mine. The tension in Harper's shoulders eased slightly. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a worn book, Elizabeth's journal. Mom wrote about you sometimes. She wondered if she made the right choice not telling you. Jason swallowed hard. May I see? Harper hesitated, then handed him the journal. Jason's hands trembled as he opened it, finding Elizabeth's familiar handwriting across the pages. Harper asks about her father sometimes, one entry read. I tell her he lives far away working on important things. Not entirely untrue. I watch Jason's company growing, his success mounting, and wonder if I robbed them both of a relationship. But would he have resented giving up his dreams for an unexpected family? Would Harper have grown up feeling like an obligation rather than a joy? I made my choice. I hope someday she'll understand why. The news broke 3 days later. Tech billionaire discovers secret daughter, screamed the headlines across every major outlet. Photographers camped outside Gloria's modest home and Harper's school, forcing her to stay home as reporters shouted questions at any visitor. How did they find out? Jason demanded, pacing the sleek conference room where his crisis management team had assembled. Marcus shook his head. Someone at the community center, maybe? Or at Harper's school? It doesn't matter now. We need to get ahead of this. The PR team proposed a carefully crafted statement acknowledging Harper as Jason's daughter, discovered only recently due to Elizabeth's untimely death, followed by legal action against any outlet harassing the minor. We'll control the narrative, the head of communications assured him. Position you as the devoted father reconnecting with his long-lost child. Jason stared at her, suddenly disgusted by the clinical approach to something so personal. This isn't a product launch. This is my daughter's life. Before he could continue, his assistant interrupted. Mr. Miller, Robert Reynolds is here. He's demanding to see you immediately. Elizabeth's brother stormed into the conference room moments later, a tall man with the same auburn hair Elizabeth had, though his was streaked with gray and his face was tight with fury. You have some nerve, Robert snarled, ignoring everyone. But Jason, 12 years of silence and now you think you can just claim her? Robert, Jason began, signaling his team to leave them. I understand you're upset. Upset? You abandoned my sister when she was pregnant with your child, and now that she's gone, you want to play daddy? Harper has a family. She doesn't need you swooping in with your billions trying to buy her affection. I didn't know Elizabeth was pregnant, Jason said quietly. She never told me. A convenient story, Robert scoffed. But even if that's true, where were you all these years? Too busy building your empire to ever check on the woman you supposedly loved? The accusation hit its mark. Why hadn't he ever reached out to Elizabeth? Pride? Fear? The relentless forward momentum of ambition that never allowed for looking back? Robert wasn't finished. Harper and Gloria were doing just fine before you showed up. Now my niece can't even go to school without reporters hounding her. This is what your world does to people. It destroys privacy, dignity, normalcy. After Robert left, promising legal action if Jason didn't back off, the crisis deepened. Robert filed an emergency petition for guardianship, claiming Jason was an absentee father with no understanding of Harper's needs, and that his sudden interest was disruptive to the child's well-being. Jason's first instinct was to crush the opposition with legal firepower. He instructed his attorneys to prepare the strongest possible counterargument, leveraging his resources and influence. We'll win this, his lead counsel assured him. Reynolds doesn't have the resources to fight. You and no judge would rule against a biological father with your means. That evening, as Jason reviewed the aggressive legal strategy his team had prepared, Harper called him on the private number he'd given her. Everyone at school knows, she said, her voice small. Some kids are saying awful things about Mom. That she was your That you paid her to. None of that is true, Jason said firmly, his heart breaking at the pain in her voice. Your mother was the most principled person I've ever known. Uncle Robert says you're going to use your money and lawyers to take me away from Grandma. Harper, that's not… Is that how you solve problems? She interrupted, a new hardness in her voice. By crushing people who disagree with you? By using your power and money to get what you want? The question hit Jason like a physical blow. It was exactly what he'd been preparing to do, deploy his vast resources to overwhelm Robert's opposition, regardless of whether that approach was best for Harper. After they hung up, Jason sat alone in his office for hours. What kind of father did he want to be? What lesson was he teaching Harper with his first significant parental decision? Elizabeth's journal entry echoed in his mind. Would Harper have grown up feeling like an obligation rather than a joy? The next morning, Jason called his legal team. Cancel everything, he instructed. We're taking a completely different approach. 1 year had passed since Jason had discovered Harper was his daughter. Standing on the terrace of his penthouse, he watched her showing her grandmother the city view, pointing out landmarks with the confidence of someone who now felt at home in this once alien space. The transformation of the penthouse reflected the transformation in Jason's life. The formerly sterile designer showcase now featured Harper's artwork on the walls, photographs on shelves, and a state-of-the-art art studio where a rarely used guest room had once been. Even Rocky, his rescue dog, had a collection of toys scattered across the once immaculate floors. Dad, Harper called, still testing the word that had become more natural over months of careful relationship building. Can we take Grandma to that Italian place tonight? The one with the tiramisu? Absolutely, Jason replied, warming at the casual way she included him in her plans now. The path to this moment had been anything but smooth. Rather than battling Robert in court, Jason had taken a radically different approach. He'd requested mediation, acknowledged the legitimacy of the family's concerns, and proposed a gradual, integration plan that prioritized Harper's emotional well-being above all else. His willingness to compromise had surprised everyone, perhaps himself most of all. The Jason Miller of a year ago would have viewed compromise as weakness, would have deployed every resource to win at any cost. Gradually, his sincerity had won over even the skeptical Robert. When Harper's uncle witnessed Jason rearranging global business meetings to attend her school art show, something shifted in their adversarial relationship. You're not who I thought you were, Robert had admitted grudgingly after watching Jason spend hours helping Harper with a challenging digital art project. Jason had established the Elizabeth Reynolds Foundation, providing arts education to underserved communities and scholarships to single parents pursuing creative careers. The foundation quickly became his primary focus as he stepped back from daily operations at Miller Technologies. Are you sure about this? Marcus had asked when Jason announced his reduced role at the company. This is everything you built. No, Jason had replied, watching Harper collaborate with Sophia on a community mural project. This is everything I built. That was just a company. Now, preparing for Harper's 12th birthday celebration, Jason felt a contentment that had eluded him throughout his years of wealth accumulation. Gloria had moved into a comfortable house near both the school and Jason's penthouse, allowing Harper to divide her time between both homes. Jason had carefully ensured the renovation preserved the cherished character of Gloria's home, while adding modern conveniences. As guests arrived for the celebration, classmates, friends from the community center, Robert and his family who had flown in from London, Jason retreated briefly to his office. From his safe, he removed a small jewelry box. When the cake had been cut and the traditional songs sung, Jason presented Harper with his gift. This is to complement the one your mother gave you, he explained as she opened the box to reveal a second sapphire bracelet, crafted to match Elizabeth's original but bearing the initials H and J discreetly worked into the links. Harper's eyes filled with tears as she connected the meaning between the two bracelets. It's perfect, she whispered, immediately putting it on her other wrist. I have something for you too, she said, leading him to her computer. I've been working on it for months. On the screen appeared a beautifully designed digital museum, a loving archive of Elizabeth's life as a mother. Using skills Jason had taught her, Harper had created a virtual gallery of photographs, artwork, and journal entries that captured the 11 years he had missed. "Now you can see who she really was," Harper explained softly. "Not just who she was to you, but who she was to me." As Jason moved through the virtual exhibit, seeing Elizabeth with baby Harper, toddler Harper, elementary school Harper, the bedtime stories, art projects, Halloween costumes, quiet moments of maternal love, he felt a complex mixture of grief and gratitude. "She wanted me to know you," Harper said, pointing to a journal entry dated from shortly before the accident. "She was planning to contact you that summer. She wrote that it was time." The revelation struck Jason deeply. Elizabeth had chosen to reach out after all those years, only to have fate intervene with cruel timing. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and Harper was staying at Gloria's for the night, Jason stood alone on his terrace, both sapphire bracelets weaving through his thoughts, one that had once symbolized a painful ending, the other a new beginning. Success, he realized, could not be measured in market share or stock prices. The real value in life lay in connections, in second chances, in the messy, imperfect love that tied one human being to another. The man who once had everything now finally had something that mattered.